Hey, DeMeco Ryans spoke to the media today and ahead of the NFL draft. He had to speak in cliches at times, as NFL coaches are forced to do by the despicable, hated sports media like myself. I will translate in those moments, but let's hop right into it. I don't know what this first question was because the YouTube stream started a little bit, and I apologize for Rotten Oxford for being late. Here we go.
Combine interviews to pro days to 30 visits. It's just one more chance for us to just get more detailed on guys, right? To figure out as much information as we can to make sure that we're adding the right guys to our team. So with the 30 visits, with not only with the quarterbacks but with every position, guys, we may have a few more questions on. It's a time for us to get them in our building, a chance for our coaches to interact with these guys, meet with them, install offenses or defenses to see how sharp they are. So it's just part of the entire process, and been happy with the 30 visits. We had a lot of really good guys in, a lot of really great men, great young men in our building. So it's been fun getting to know these guys throughout the process.
Yeah, I think when it comes to what can you learn in those meetings, it varies a lot. I think when he gets to talk about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, a couple questions from now, I'll expound upon that a little bit further. But these are not useless meetings, and I think a lot of times people read a little too much into who they bring in and who they don't bring in. There are some guys that they simply want to, they might want to see how they respond to criticism. They might want to see if they own up to their mistakes. They also just might want to get some genuine answers to questions about what happened in their scheme. And so it's generally a pretty positive thing. I had a great time on my visit. That I remember the best was the Jaguars, who ended up drafting me. And I think a big part of it there was like I was able to like kind of be very honest about some of my shortcomings and everything, and they liked that because I think they thought I was going to be like a stuck up prick from the Ivy League, which I was, but I hit it very well.
The start of the off-season program, what's your message to the team? What was it like standing in front of the room and addressing the guys?
Our first day of off-season started, and it was encouraging. Great participation from a lot of our guys, and for me, the message to our guys is really just, how are we showing up, right? Showing up on purpose, being detailed, oriented in how we work, and just continue to have a growth mindset in everything we do, right? Our guys understand that we want to be the best. We have to continue to strive to be better each day in everything that we do. So we're excited as coaches. We're excited to have the opportunity to meet with our guys for the first time, have the opportunity to, in a couple weeks, to actually go on the field with our guys and work with them. So it's an exciting time. We feel the energy, the excitement from around the city, from our players, our entire building. We're all fired up. We're excited to get going.
Two things about that. One, the off-season program. When you first start off, it's all weights and running and everything. The position coaches are only allowed to be so involved at certain points in the off-season. So it's a lot about just strength and conditioning at this point. I think as far as DeMeco being the coach, the one nice thing about having a player coach oftentimes is that they do not waste time on meetings, because as a player, especially as you get older, you realize like, oh my God, like 75% of these meetings are for rookies and not guys that actually know what they're doing. So guys like DeMeco tend to be pretty straightforward. Like, hey, this is what we expect out of you. Meet our expectations. You'll be awesome. Let's do it. Let's do it.
You want to organize this offseason, first year as a head coach, and what kind of ideas did you have to bring in with that?
How we organize the offseason, it starts just with, first and foremost, just one-on-one meetings with our players and our coaches, just to establish a relationship with our coaches and players. And we just want our players to understand that we're here for them, and we want the best for our players, and we're here to help them be better. And that's where the off-season starts. And we'll continue to be player-focused, and it's individualized for each player. How can we help them get better? And that's where our focus will be this offseason.
Yeah, and again, like first time head coach organizing all this stuff, I get the sense that that's one of the reasons maybe DeMeco pulled himself out last year, was that you realize when you're getting into the interview process, like how much and how organized you have to be. And that's one reason I feel a lot better about like Nick Caserio, for better or for worse, has been through this now with three head coaches, one of whom was a first time head coach in David Cully, and who I think probably wasn't as well prepared as DeMeco Ryans. So I feel good about that part of it.
I wondered what the last couple of months been like for you. I'm sure it's been a bit of a whirlwind with everything, getting involved in everything and kind of taking over. But I just wondered, could you describe that? And how excited are you to be a part of this draft process to help build the team you're in charge of?
This entire process has been great. First coming in, being named head coach, awesome. But I know right after that was over, right, it's time to get to work. And we had a lot of work to do when it comes to adding free agents to our team, and also just the draft process, evaluating all the prospects within the draft. It's a lot of work, and it's great having a lot of really good people to help you out with the work. So working with Nick it's been great. Working with our coaches, right, that's been outstanding. Everybody having their input, right, everybody's input has been valuable to me, right, to make sure that we're having a thorough process in everything that we're doing. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun work when you're doing it with really good people.
This is a good question from Edward. How much input will DeMeco Ryans have on the draft? Let me see that. There we go. Will DeMeco Ryans have on the draft? I think a good amount. And, the question is always, okay, who's actually running the draft? If you think about when Bill O'Brien and Rick Smith were there, Rick Smith was running the draft. And I remember in that first year, Bill O'Brien talked about it like, hey, I just got to sit there and watch Rick Smith run it. Ultimately, those guys didn't have a very productive or healthy relationship, I guess. I think that's not a secret or anything. And I think that right now, DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio are very much trying to learn in a lot of ways, okay, what's the vocabulary? So when I say a guy is fast or explosive or has good change of direction, what exactly does that mean? Because sometimes it varies a little bit. So guys got to be speaking the same language. And then the second, I think, is Nick has talked to Sean and I about this in the mornings. Of Nick, really understanding what does Bobby Slowick want, need, and expect out of his players. What does DeMeco Ryans want, need, and expect out of his players? And like so far, these two seem simpatico. We'll see if it needs to survive some adversity. I feel pretty optimistic about it.
Going into the
Yeah, and I cannot boost DeMeco's volume, so once again, StreamYard is screwing you guys. I hope this isn't too bad.
Is there a scenario where you guys could pass on a quarterback at the top of the draft? It's not specifically that if you like this, you could pass on a quarterback.
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about what we're doing with our plans for the draft. We'll evaluate. We'll have to be ready to pick. When our time comes to pick, we'll be ready to pick.
Yeah, he's not talking about the draft.
A rebuilding situation, you have some foundational pieces that you can build on, but could you speak to some of the needs that you all may be able to address in the draft?
With the free agency process, that was very important to me to add veteran guys to our team, right? So I feel like we did a really good job, right, adding guys at multiple positions that have NFL experience. So we're not going into a draft where there's this huge need, right? We have guys with experience. Now with the draft process, we can take our time. We can add young guys who can come in and add depth to our roster, and guys that we can take the time to develop, right, and give those guys time to develop and grow and become starters eventually.
And that's honestly one thing where I'm A-okay with the way they're doing it right now with the draft, with free agency, where it's about mostly 1-year contracts, 2-year contracts. I think guys like Jimmy Ward and some of the other players, that you've added on the offensive line, on the defensive line, they've gone about basically acting one actual genuine starter per position group. That does put you in the draft in a position where you don't have to feel desperate to go up and, take a center earlier than you'd like. If you take a center that number 33 overall, where maybe that's stretching a little bit compared to where you typically like to be. They signed the Connor kid yesterday. So I like it. I know a lot of people wanted them to be more aggressive in free agency. I think aggression for the Texans is going to come in the form of we've got oodles and oodles of first and second and third round picks over the next couple of years. And hopefully I think they'll get more aggressive. Like, I don't need them to be ridiculously wasteful spending in free agency, but I think next year they'll they'll start to get more aggressive.
Understanding that, you say you all won't pay too much attention to what other teams are doing, but if your preferred guy is off the draft, have you all had discussions about trading up, or have you all talked with the Panthers about trading up at all?
So if you couldn't hear that, he asked about whether or not they've had discussions about trading up if their preferred guy isn't available, or if they might think about trading up with the Panthers.
Yeah, I won't get into draft strategy and trades and all of those things.
Yeah, so he's not going to get into that stuff. What did one of you guys say? Seemed like DeMeco got annoyed when people started asking him about drafting and developing guys. Yeah, I don't either annoyed or just, he can't answer those questions. I felt this way with both David Culley and DeMeco. When you're a first-time head coach, I think there's still that part of you that wants to please people, and you can't. You want to be polite and do, be a decent guy, but then you really learn the harsh realities of being a head coach. That like, oh yeah, I just got to basically give these guys the stiff arm all day long. DeMeco's had a lot of experience, A, as a player, B, as a coordinator, that I don't think David Culley had, and obviously DeMeco's wired a little bit differently. It's got a bit of a different persona than David Culley, but annoyed might be the right word. I watched him last year after a couple of San Francisco games that were pretty tough. And I was curious, like after the Kansas City Chiefs game, which the 49ers really got throttled, had a tough go of it on defense, especially. And DeMeco didn't really waver. Now that's on Thursday after the game. I believe that was a Monday night game, so he's got a few days to digest that and calm down. It's after the game is always different. I would be surprised if DeMeco really gets overly peeved or goes off on anybody this year. That's just not his demeanor.
Couple weeks to actually go on the field with our guys and work with them, so it's an exciting time. We feel the energy, the excitement from around the city, from our players, our entire building. We're all fired up. We're excited to get going.
How did you want to organize this offseason, first year as a head coach, and what kind of ideas did you have to bring in with that?
How we organize the offseason, it starts just with, first and foremost, just one-on-one meetings with our players and our coaches, just to establish a relationship with our coaches and players. And we just want our players to understand that we're here for them, and we want the best for our players, and we're here to help them be better. And that's where the offseason starts. And we'll continue to be player focused, and it's individualized for each player. How can we help them get better? And that's where our focus will be this offseason.
Two things about that. When you first meet with a new coach, I always enjoyed it because it's that kick in the butt. It's like every year you're looking for something to give you a little extra motivation. And whenever you have a new coach, especially a head coach, but then even a new position coach or something, like you got to prove yourself to that guy all over again. And those conversations, the second part, those conversations are always interesting because I think the coaches, I think want to have a clean slate for everybody, and yet they've watched film on these guys. So I remember when Bob Karmelowitz came in as our defensive line coach with Gary Kubiak, he brought me in. He showed me some areas he wanted me to think about improving and working on, and he showed me a few clips of some of my bad plays. And the problem was, it was I won't say who it was. It was another white dude who had played for the Texans the year before. And he's like, that's in my mind. I'm thinking like, oh, this is the impression he's got of me, that the white guy that's getting his ass kicked on there. So ultimately, I corrected him. I felt weird correcting him because it felt like I was making an excuse. Like I had to, you don't want to be making excuses for bad play, but I felt like it was fair to point out that wasn't actually me screwing up. And he ended up liking me. Took a while, but he liked me.
DeMeco, I wonder what the last couple of months been like for you. I'm sure it's been a bit of a whirlwind with everything, getting involved in everything and kind of taking over. But I just wondered, could you describe that, and how excited are you to be a part of this draft process to help build the team you're in charge of?
This entire process has been great. First coming in, being named head coach, awesome. But I know right after that was over, right, it's time to get to work. And we had a lot of work to do, and when it comes to adding free agents to our team, and also just the draft process, evaluating all the prospects within the draft. It's a lot of work, and it's great having a lot of really good people to help you out with the work. So working with Nick has been It's been great working with our coaches. Right, that's been outstanding. Everybody having their input. Right, everybody's input has been valuable to me. Right, to make sure that we're having a thorough process in everything that we're doing. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun work when you're doing it with really good people.
Another thing about DeMeco is that I think he brought in a pretty good mix of some people that he'd worked with before, some other people that he hadn't worked with at all before, but maybe had some good word of mouth on. And I wonder if at least part of that might have been Chip Kelly's influence. And the Chip Kelly dynamic is one that I hadn't really thought about until DeMeco brought it up in his introductory press conference. But Chip Kelly Chip Kelly did a lot of things that ended up kind of wearing out its welcome over the course of several years, but he also did some really cool things in constructing a staff as a first-time head coach. It was not a lot of nepotism. Like, he brought in guys he'd never met before, brought in guys that he kind of researched. And Jeff Stoutland was one of those guys, the offensive line coach, who's still there in Philadelphia, probably one of the best offensive line coaches from the last couple decades. And it was because Chip Kelly just had an extremely open mind about it and wasn't going to allow nepotism or favors or back scratching to kind of guide him. So I think that's something that I think DeMeco has done. And then one real quick question here before we get back to DeMeco. Somebody says, if you come around more to CJ, and are you buying all this Bryce Young hype right now? I don't know if I'm buying the Bryce Young hype. I really like him. So whether I'm subject to the hype or not, or vulnerable to it, I don't know. I have come way more around to CJ though, and I'm like, at this point, I'm not just fence straddling. I really genuinely like both these guys, and I can see the downsides of both of them. So I'm banking on Kubshanistan being the biggest factor between these two. And hopefully, honestly, whichever one of these guys Frank Reich decides to take, I will take both of those people, both Frank Reich and whichever quarterback he takes, two people who I admire a lot. And I will wish really bad things upon them. Not in life, just in football. I hope they fail miserably.
Going into the
We got like two quarterbacks at the top of the draft. Is there a scenario where you guys could pass on a quarterback at the top of the draft?
Oh, so he asked if there's a scenario where they could pass on a quarterback at the top of the draft. And I'm guessing he's not going to answer this, given his previous response to a draft question.
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about what we're doing with our plans for the draft. We'll evaluate. We'll have to be ready to pick. When our time comes to pick, we'll be ready to pick.
That's where they start to get you. You got to be careful, DeMeco, because you see, like right there, he said, I'm not going to talk about the draft, but then he expounded a little bit because you get tired. This is what happens to good people when they get put in these positions. It's like when a good person gets put on the witness stand, they can get upended because they're trying to do the right thing. And this used to happen to Cully. And again, Cully, completely different person than DeMeco, but you start to feel basically rude. As a player, it happens like this too. You feel rude saying no comment, no comment, no comment all the time. It's when you start trying to mix it up a little bit that you get in trouble. I think we're going to be cool. I don't think DeMeco all of a sudden is going to tell everybody who exactly they want to draft.
Coach, coming into a rebuilding situation, you have some foundational pieces that you can build on, but could you speak to some of the needs that you all may be able to address in the draft?
With the free agency process, that was very important to me to add veteran guys to our team, right? So I feel like we did a really good job, right, adding guys at multiple positions that have NFL experience. So we're not going into a draft where there's this huge need, right? We have guys with experience. Now with the draft process, we can take our time. We can add young guys who can come in and add depth to our roster, and guys that we can take the time to develop, right, and give those guys time to develop and grow and become starters eventually.
And honestly, again, when we get back to the free agency strategy, I think this year has been an amped up version of what they've done the previous 2 years. The previous 2 years, I think it was, I don't want to call it tanking with dignity, even though that's what I've called it in the past. I think it's a reset, but where you're trying not to sabotage your culture and all of your young players. I think if you look at some places like Cleveland, when they did a elegant tank themselves and they loaded up with a bunch of talent and they have a hell of a roster, and yet I think something was lost in all of that. It's hard to do. It's like you see it with the Rockets right now. like, man, you can load up with young talent, but if you don't have some veterans there guiding this young talent, it's really tough to have the right kind of culture and platform from which to build. So that's what Caserio was trying to do the last couple of years. This year, they're adding these guys on 1 and 2 year deals, but they're actually viable starters, guys that would start on multiple other teams in the NFL. And it's on a little bit of a prove it deal, but hopefully what you're hoping is that those young guys now that you draft have a little leeway, a little, a carrot on the stick and some time to develop. Well, they have an older veteran guy that can show them the ropes.
Understanding that, you say you all won't pay too much attention to what other teams are doing, but if your preferred guy is off the draft, have you all had discussions about trading up, or have you all talked with the Panthers about trading up at all?
Yeah, I won't get into draft strategy and trades and all of those things.
Did I rewind on this or something? Because
Case Keenum.
they asked the same damn question, didn't they?
But Case, you a true professional, right? And he's going to be that coach on the field for us. Case has a ton of experience. He's been in a lot of different schemes, has a depth of knowledge. I feel like as a player, sometimes another player in that room can say things in a different light that may hit you a little different than the coaches can. So with Case and just all of the experience he has, just see him as a guy who can come in and help the younger guys who are in the room.
Look, hey, and man, Matt Schaub made a good living his final years in the NFL. I think his last years were with the Falcons. Remember when they had Schaub in the room to help Matt Ryan, who was already a veteran quarterback, learn that offense. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So whether it's Case, and Case has all those right personality qualities where his main job, I was about to say his main job isn't to help the rookie quarterback, but really it probably is going to be, unless they surprise everybody and don't take a quarterback and he's starting.
DeMeco, what are some of the things that you're doing to develop chemistry and synergy within your coaching staff?
Yeah, with our coaches, our coaches, this is a fun group of guys. Really enjoy being around each other. We spent a lot of time over the past month or so being around it, but it's been cool to see how all of our guys have gelled well together and worked well together. So our guys do a good job of not only being here, but connecting outside of the building, right? Spending time, families, our wives, being able to interact, and just that's the type of atmosphere I wanted to create here, is that family atmosphere. And I'm seeing it first and foremost with our coaching staff and their families.
That's the last thing on earth that I would ever want to be as a coach's wife, because I hate forced socialization, and I feel like there's a lot of forced socialization with coach's wife.
How is John Mechie doing, and what is his status?
I would be the biggest bitch.
So what do you guys kind of feel like he is at medically and also just from a football standpoint?
Yeah, John is doing fine. We'll see John get involved with our off-season program, and with John, as with every other player, we're going to take it one day at a time and see, where he can grow and where he can be when time comes, the right time, when the season comes. We'll see where he is.
Okay, since I saw this question a little bit earlier, and this is relevant, do you think JSN, Smith and Jigba, the receiver out of Ohio State, would excel in our scheme? I know you like Quentin Johnston. Yeah, there's another one. Like the more and more you watch all these guys, you start to fall in love with specific attributes on all of them. And I know a lot of people look at Smith and Jigba as a slot receiver only. I think there's disagreement on that, especially since he tested really well, and he might be more of a versatile guy. He's not a tiny slot receiver. I think that's the big thing, is that if you run this offense the way Kyle Shanahan likes it, he wants guys blocking downfield, but he also wants guys that can run after the catch. And Jackson Smith and Jigba certainly has that. And I also think that Bobby Slowick potentially could run more of like a Sean McVay type of system, or some of these other guys that have a little bit more maybe speed and shiftiness in their wide receiver. But that's relevant, obviously, because John Mechie is more of a slot receiver and not as physically gifted as Jackson Smith and Jigba. So that's the interesting thing right there. There'd be a lot of competition there. And that also, I think if they take Jackson Smith and Jigba, they probably look at him as a guy that they think can develop on the outside.
What's been the biggest differences in the draft process from your time when you were a coordinator versus now being the lead man in charge?
The cool part about this process with the draft for the past 3 years, when I was in San Fran, I've sat through draft meetings for every position. So this is not a new year for me. It's the same as it's been the past 3 years. We sat in and heard evaluations from all of the offensive prospects and defensive prospects. So for me, it's very important for me to have the coach's input, have the scouts' input, have everybody's input on a player to make sure that we're adding the right guys to our team. So it's not a new process for me. Been through it a couple years, so it's the same. It's pretty interesting to see, when you go through it a few times, it's easy to kind of comp players to different players from the past. So it's been an interesting process.
Yeah, and as far as getting all that input from everybody, that's the part that's really interesting right now if you're trying to figure out what the Panthers are doing. Because Scott Fitterer, the general manager of the Panthers, he has said, look, I don't want to know what Frank Reich's opinion is on these players or who he wants. We will do that 1 to 2 weeks before the draft. So I think that, look, when you hear reports about somebody from Carolina liking or disliking, you hear mostly about like, oh yeah, such and such likes Bryce Young a lot, or such and such likes CJ Stroud, or Frank Reich only likes tall quarterbacks, all those things. I think what you're hearing are nuggets that are true in terms of what a guy likes or what a guy has worked with, but they're not necessarily really comparing notes in terms of what their conclusions are, because you want to get everybody's like unblemished input. You don't want your scouts or your coworker to have his opinion biased by your opinion, especially with your underlings. So I do think that like the Panthers themselves might not actually know which way the Panthers are leaning right now. And that's why somebody had asked earlier why the Texans are being secretive about what they'll do at number 2. I don't think they need to be in a position where they're like making some kind of statement that one of the quarterbacks could either take offense to, or just like, what are you going to say? Get up there and be like, oh, we're just going to take the sloppy seconds of whoever the Panthers have. And they also probably just want to, maintain, if somebody comes in and offers up some absurd trade, they want to have the flexibility to perhaps at least consider accepting it.
Have you had a chance, I know you haven't had a chance to be on the field with your players here yet, but have you learned anything that you didn't know about the people that are already here just in your short time that stands out for you?
Nothing I didn't know already. Nothing I haven't learned that I've already knew about most of the guys. When you talk about a guy like John Mechie, just meeting him in person, right, hearing his story and then meeting him in person, like it marries up. Like outstanding young man off the field, great energy, always around. Every time I seen him in the building, huge smile on his face, no matter what adversity he's faced, right? He's attacking it with a smile, attacking it with the right attitude, and it just solidifies the type of person that he is and the type of people and the type of players that we want to add to our team is guys with that type of attitude.
Coach, you talked about the veteran free agents that you all brought in. You brought them in. A lot of them have short-term deals. As a former player, were you able to evaluate what you were bringing into your team and what they will be able to add even in that short amount of time that they're signed for?
Right. The guys that we added, I feel like they bring the type of style of play that I want them to play with, right? And even though it's a short-term deal, right, guys are hungry, and that's the most exciting thing about it, right? Guys have short deals. Most of the guys are betting on themselves, and I love that about the players, because a guy's betting on himself to come out, showcase, and prove the type of player that he is. And a lot of guys are looking for the bigger deal, right? So it says a lot about the mindset of the guys we're bringing in, that they truly believe in themselves, right? They have that belief, they have that motivation, they have the right mindset to prove it, and I'm all about having those players.
Yeah, and that's I see there's a little bit of tight end discussion going on there, as far as because there's some people wanting a tight end, and there's some really good tight ends there, obviously in the draft this year. They signed Dalton Schultz, and I think Dalton Schultz is exactly one of those guys that he's talking about there. Dalton Schultz, very productive player with the Cowboys. A lot of people thought that, okay, maybe he's just a product of the system, which was interesting to me because it's not like he was surrounded by, AJ Browns and a bunch of dudes. Surrounded by one really good guy and some other ones. But anyway, I think he had the misfortune of being a free agent in a year where there are a bunch of really good tight ends available in the draft. So it probably drove his value down. And also, I think people think he was just more a product of being the safety blanket for Dak Prescott. I'm A-okay with Dalton Schultz being a safety blanket for a rookie quarterback, and maybe he works his way into a nice deal here. But I also don't think it precludes you from drafting a tight end. Do remember that if you think about DeMeco's experience, and maybe the best tight end he ever played on a team with was Owen Daniels. Owen Daniels was a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick. You guys remember this stuff better than I do. And I played with Owen Daniels. So, and if you look at George Kittle out in San Francisco, 5th-round pick. Yeah, Owen was a 4th-round pick or 3rd-round pick, and Kittle was a 5th-round pick. So, it doesn't mean you can't draft somebody in the 1st round, but shoot, think about Nick Caserio. Gronkowski and Hernandez, a 2nd and a 3rd-round pick. So I think that they think you don't have to stretch or reach for a tight end, and they're likely going to be one of those guys that's talked about as a potential 1st rounder, falling into the 2nd round or potentially further.
Stroud and Young, are they both visiting this week?
We visited with Stroud last week, and Bryce will be coming in.
Whenever you go in, I don't know how many quarterbacks you'll have in your top 30, but do you go in with the same set of questions? I mean, how do you go in with these guys to kind of understand them, and what's,
To me, meeting with players, it's organic. It's not a set list of questions that we go down. It's organic because each individual is different. So I don't treat guys the same, or I don't have the same set of questions for everybody. It's just an organic meeting, like truly trying to understand and get to know the person, understand their why and what motivates them.
Okay, so I do think that with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, if indeed what they're going to do is just take whichever one the Panthers don't, which I could see is very, very likely. I think they like both these guys. I would expect that they like both these guys. I think a lot of it might come down to, okay, if this is the guy we're going to end up having, what does he know now? What did he like doing in college? What didn't he like doing? They can talk to Bryce Young about Bill O'Brien's offense, which elements he liked about it, what he might have wanted to change. And, how do we tailor our plan for him in advance so that once it's draft night and you know who you're taking, you can hit the ground running. You've got a plan for how to get CJ Stroud going, how to get Bryce Young going. So that part where there's extreme ambiguity and yet also a bunch of clarity, and that you have no idea which one of the two guys it's going to be right now, but it's probably going to be one of those two if that is indeed their strategy.
With quarterbacks, because you've been around quarterbacks before and with the 49ers too, what qualities do you find most impressive?
With any position, I think the qualities I'm looking for is guys who are dedicated to work, guys who are dedicated to be the best at what they're doing. And I feel like you get guys with that mindset, that they're coachable, they're accountable to their teammates. Right? You get guys with the right mindset, guys who want to be better, no matter what the position is. It doesn't matter. Quarterback, linebacker, D lineman. We want guys who are willing to be coachable, guys who are willing to work, guys who want to be the best at what they're doing.
Yeah, and I guess that's the tricky part is I don't know if it's possible to really predict who's going to be the Peyton Manning type of work ethic guy. Tom Brady, those two guys are the gold standards, but a lot of what comes with that too isn't just the work ethic. If you think about the really good quarterbacks, they've got a taskmaster element to them. Like they hold guys accountable. Pat Mahomes, I feel like even Pat Mahomes has developed in that regard. And I'm not saying you got to be a jerk or anything. I've just seen Pat Mahomes grow into that role of being demanding of his guys. And I think that's the part that might be hard to really figure, because in college, especially in college when you're on a good team, it's a different type of leadership. It's a different type of expectations, different type of demands than it is in the NFL, where it's just a razor's edge all the time in terms of execution and what the quarterback expects from you. So I like both these guys exhibit really good work ethic and all that, but I don't know if you can really predict if they're going to ultimately be those guys that drive everybody else around them to greatness. Sometimes maddeningly so.
We have talked with DeMeco about the opportunity to add depth, in addition to the veterans that you guys added in free agency, adding depth in the draft. But how do you sort of view this opportunity, having the number 2 overall pick, to add a leader to the team, add somebody that could potentially be the face of the franchise and lead the team for much longer than, say, 2 years or so?
Yeah, having the number 2 pick it's exciting for us to have the number 2 pick, but it's also at the same time there's no pressure where the young man is picked. I think it's unfair to ask a guy just because you're picked number 2 overall, you have to come in and you're the face of our franchise and you're the leader. That's unfair to the guy, right? And I'm not going to put that type of weight on the shoulders of whoever that is that we pick. That's not what we're anticipating. That's not what we're expecting them to do. We're expecting them to come in, be a great teammate, work hard, right? Be deliberate in what you're doing, and have a mindset to get better each and every day. That's the mindset. No matter if it's pick 2 or the last pick of the draft, it really doesn't matter when you get picked, right? Leaders, those guys will grow based on our team, and each team is different. Like we have leaders in our locker room already, so I'm not asking a guy to come in and be this savior for our team. Asking a guy to come in and just put his head down and just work.
I really like that approach, because I think as he was saying that, I kind of got that image in my mind of various guys that you want to be the taskmasters or be guys that are driven. And a lot of times with athletes, the really driven ones, it really is a matter of like, you don't need to heap more expectations on their shoulders because they already have really high expectations of themselves. If anything, it's a matter of simplifying things for them and saying, hey, you can focus on just this. You don't have to be everything to everybody. That'll come along the way. And I think the natural leaders, the quarterbacks who are natural leaders, also understand that. There's a matter of you got to come in and earn the respect of these guys before you turn into that. Like I said, Pat Mahomes is becoming a guy who can be more demanding of his guys. But despite how good he was when he was a young player, you still have to kind of earn that respect and that veteran status before you can do that. So it's true. Like the quarterback, leadership with a quarterback is interesting. And I remember Tom Coughlin telling me this, that, the quarterback has so much on his plate that you don't need or want him to be the guy that kind of takes control of the entire team. He's just got to lead in certain ways. And a lot of that comes through in the way he plays quarterback and runs and executes the offense. And I think that's what DeMeco knows and understands. And so I feel good about that part. The last thing a rookie needs is basically for him to come in and you say, hey, listen, you're going to learn how to play in the NFL. And also at the same time, let's turn around the culture. Let's do that.
Do you think being a former player, how do you think that shapes how you go through the evaluating process when you're looking at young guys coming into the league?
Look, I've seen a lot of different players, being a player in this league. Seen a lot of different players, a lot of different talent. I think for me, in the evaluation process, I just know it can be done multiple ways, many different people, different sizes, different shapes, different talents. It can be done multiple ways, so I don't get handcuffed into a guy has to be a certain measurable, a certain size, a certain this, a certain that. It's just what is that guy's character makeup, and what type of play style does he have on the field?
And this is something that Nick Caserio has talked about with Sean Pendergast and I in the morning show at times and it's hard for me because I get too wrapped up in wanting to have a system or a way of doing certain things. In my entire life, this has plagued me. But there's kind of like a being comfortable with ambiguity. There's this, being able to dive into something without knowing exactly how things are going to turn out. But as much as we talk about, in New England, the Tom Brady system or something like that, really the Tom Brady offense was malleable based on what they needed that year. And it changed and morphed. The Bill Belichick defense at times has been a 3-4, at times has been a 4-3. It changes and morphs based on what their players are and what their needs are in the league that year. And I think likewise, when it comes to quarterbacks, like, hey, if Davis Mills is your quarterback, it's going to be a certain type of offense that year. If Deshaun Watson's your quarterback, it's going to be a certain type of offense. And if Bryce Young or CJ Stroud is your quarterback, it's going to be a certain type of offense. And then especially, you really don't know. So you've got to be open to, following and adhering to a certain set of principles. But one of those principles is being flexible as hell on everything else.
When you were in San Francisco, you had multiple first-round picks in the defensive line, but you had a lot of day 3 players, 5 total, that started on the secondary, the linebacking core. When you look at day 3 players who are potential roster cuts, what are intangibles that you are required to have for them as people, not as players?
Yeah, as people, day 3 guys, they have to be very intrinsically motivated. I feel like that's the makeup of day 3 guys. Right? They have this desire that can be unmatched, and that allows them to unseat guys that are in front of them, that allows them to go on and be very quality players in the NFL, right? It has to be a little different because there may be some type of measurable or something that didn't quite match up to make you that day 1 guy. So what's your drive? What's going to give you that edge? And most of those day 3 guys have a certain chip on their shoulder that allows guys who may be touted as the best all the time, right? And they get relaxed. Day 3 guys, sometimes they have that chip on their shoulder that just drives them over the top. And I love guys who coming in and have a chip on their shoulder, have something to prove. They work different.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing too, is you talk about watching your own biases. I think, DeMeco, not a day 3 guy as a draftee, but a guy that's always been hungry. And like his best work as a position coach was with Fred Warner, who is a 5th round pick. Dre Greenlaw was a 3rd round pick, I believe. Those guys are hungry, and they're a couple of the best linebackers in the league now in San Francisco. They were in San Francisco with DeMeco. But I guess sometimes you have to worry about also falling in love a little too much with those guys. There is a place, because I figure I was a day 3, well at the time day 2, but a day 3 guy, a 4th round pick with a chip on my shoulder my entire career. But over time you realize, yeah, but sometimes it's nice to have somebody who's like freakishly big and strong and fast too. So the guys, obviously the dream guys are the guys that have a chip on their shoulder, but they're also freakishly big and strong and fast. That's why late bloomers are so awesome. Guys that were skinny guys that had to get beat up a little bit and then grew into their body, like Michael Jordan, they've always got that chip on their shoulder. And you guys have a bunch of good questions over here. I'll get into them. I just want to be sure I get through the entire press conference.
There's a lot of excitement from the fan base. There's a lot of excitement from the fan base with your hiring and you coming here. Do you feel any pressure behind that?
No pressure for me at all. This is an outstanding organization, outstanding job. I love the excitement being around the city. Just everybody stopping, fans are excited. They want to take pictures. They want autographs. It's an exciting time, and I don't feel any pressure, all right, because I know I'm surrounding myself with the right people, and I know we can get the job done, right? And I know Houston is hungry for a winner. Trust me, I'm just as hungry, to create a winner here for this organization, for this city. It means a lot to me, and I want to be able to bring that to Houston. So it's no pressure. It reminds me, just continue to put your head down and go to work with the right purpose, right, and to be detailed and just to make sure we're adding really great players to our team. So when we line up on that field on Sundays, I want to just put a team out there that our city is proud of.
As far as the selfies go, I wholeheartedly endorse that new trend of guys giving selfies instead of autographs, because that's just a much more personal thing. So not that I ever mind, I always had an appropriate level of autograph giving. It wasn't like I was, I never was on the level of somebody that was getting mobbed anywhere they went or anything. So if somebody approached me for an autograph, they were like genuine football fans. But if I had to do like 100 selfies or 100 autographs, I'd much rather do 100 selfies.
That first shot right at the Rockets game.
Hopefully that helps.
What are your thoughts on rookie quarterbacks starting right away? I know Purdy's had a few games before he got in. Trey Lance had a year. What are your thoughts on that? And do you feel like you all have done enough to put enough pieces around for that person to be successful if that potentially happens?
with the quarterback position, it's all about the guy. Right? We talk about a rookie quarterback, a veteran quarterback. It doesn't matter. Like, what's the makeup of the guy, and is he worthy to start for your team? That's all that matters. It doesn't matter where the guy is in his career. Is he a rookie? Is he third year, fourth year? Who's the best guy? Who's the right guy for our team? And we don't know that right now. We haven't lined up and went out and practiced football at all, so we'll figure that out when the time comes.
We'll close with Roach, DJ, and Drew. You were talking about the number 2 pick or whoever at that slot had not to be the save to remove the weight. You're not going to put the weight on the shoulders like that. How do you remove that for a player?
I let him know from the start there's no pressure. That's it. I'm not putting pressure on a guy like to come in and just because of where you're picked in the draft, it's unfair to say that a guy is the leader of an organization and he hasn't played one snap for our team.
Yeah, and that's that's another thing too. Like let me get that off that's a bad still shot for DeMeco. There we go. I don't know how you go about like taking any of that pressure off of him other than just you don't need to add extra pressure to his situation. So I like where DeMeco is with that. And I think he also comes from a place in San Francisco where they played with multiple different quarterbacks and got it done multiple different ways, and I think they really genuinely I don't want to say they don't fall in love with guys, but that's just always been kind of the Gary Kubiak methodology that maybe DeMeco picked up a little bit, which is like, hey, I don't, whether it's Sage Rosenfels or Matt Schaub or eventually an aging Peyton Manning, we're going to use that guy and we're going to get the best out of him. And if we need to go elsewhere, we'll go elsewhere, but we're not going to pin all of our hopes and dreams on one Jimmy Garoppolo.
Feel with our guys and work with them. So it's an exciting time. We feel the energy, the excitement from around the city, from our players, our entire building. We're all fired up. We're excited to get going.
How did you want to organize this offseason, first year as a head coach, and what kind of ideas did you have to bring in with that?
How we organize the offseason, it starts just with, first and foremost, just one-on-one meetings with our players and our coaches, just to establish a relationship with our coaches and players. And we just want our players to understand that we're here for them, and we want the best for our players, and we're here to help them be better. And that's where the offseason starts. And we'll continue to be player-focused, and it's individualized for each player. How can we help them get better? And that's where our focus will be this offseason.
DeMeco, I wonder what the last couple of months been like for you. I'm sure it's been a bit of a whirlwind with everything, getting involved in everything and kind of taking over. But I just wondered, could you describe that? And how excited are you to be a part of this draft process to help build the team you're in charge of?
This entire process has been great. First coming in, being named head coach, awesome. But I know right after that was over, right, it was time to get to work. And we had a lot of work to do when it comes to adding free agents to our team, and also just the draft process, evaluating all the prospects within the draft. It's a lot of work, and it's great having a lot of really good people to help you out with the work. So working with Nick it's been great. Working with our coaches, right, that's been outstanding. Everybody having their input, right, everybody's input has been valuable to me, right, to make sure that we're having a thorough process in everything that we're doing. So it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun work when you're doing it with really good people.
Going into the
Well, they squeezed in an extra question here. Okay.
Texas, you guys like 2 quarterbacks at the top of the draft. Is there a scenario where you guys could pass on a quarterback?
Wait a sec. Okay, we went back. Okay, good. All right. I was like, man, they asked that question again, those sons of bitches. I swear they asked the same question about it, the scenario where the Texans could either pass on a quarterback or trade up with Carolina. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they're going to trade up with Carolina. Let me get to some of these questions you guys had during. I didn't want to interrupt DeMeco, even though I interrupted him literally 47 times there. But I apologize about the sound. I think the best thing I could do next time is when I record, I'll go back and amp the volumes up on the recording, because everything's just kind of preset in this service that I use to live stream. Do you feel Nick C is under more pressure to draft a quarterback than DeMeco since he has a 6-year contract to build and find the right QB? It's a good question. Yeah, I think DeMeco's job security is pretty sound. Like I don't want to think this way, but if I had to, I think that DeMeco would survive a Nick Caserio dismissal. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I do think that, and I know, and I myself have said at times, I like it to be like one clean fell swoop. If you're going to fire a GM, fire the head coach too. I would actually, like, if I were an owner, I would, like with Rick Smith and Bill O'Brien, I would want to say, like, listen, all right, you two, like, figure it out, because your two fates are intertwined. You're either going to figure it out and work together, or you're both gone, and I'll start anew. I don't think it's going to come to that with Caserio and DeMeco, and I think the biggest difference in the reason I feel good about those guys is they both, I think, have the ability to kind of they have the ability to understand other people's perspectives, and also, and this is key, and I don't think that Bill O'Brien is good at this part of the whole deal. You don't have to keep score. If a GM selects a guy and he turns out not to be a good player, don't bring up old crap and argue. Don't be the person that, like, in a relationship is bringing up stuff that happened 2 years ago. And some coaches and some GMs can't let that go. I don't get that sense that DeMeco and Nick Caserio are going to be like that. Like, remember when Caserio, when Bill O'Brien said, "That's your pick, Jack," about the Cunningham selection? Like who thinks like that? It's kind of like, all right, it better work out or else. Which, yeah, I know it's Easterby and it's fun to think about maybe, O'Brien bullying Easterby a little bit or something, but that's like a little view into the, like, a destructively competitive nature amongst people who are supposed to be teamworks that I'd ever liked. And I don't think that DeMeco or Caserio have that. Let's see. There was a little discussion about tight ends and whether they should take tight ends or not. Personally, I'm not eager to take one of these guys with a number, certainly not with a number 12 pick overall. Number 33, sure, I could totally go for that. Somebody said they want a James Casey type back on the team. Hunter Lepke is my guy. Yeah, like somebody that can play fullback or tight end, be that H-back type of guy. And just like yesterday, my voice is going to give out on me, so I can't do too many of the Q&As. Do you think that defensive end is the main spot on defense that needs to be addressed? If not, what spots do you see needing upgrades? Okay. Center, despite the fact that the Texans just signed Connor McWhat's-his-face, I think that's still a spot that they very much need a young guy to come in and hopefully be good. And that's the beauty of where they're set up right now, is they've got options with veteran players, but they also could get a good center in the second round. It's rare that you have to go into the first round for a center, and there's some good centers in the draft this year. Defensive end, yes, and always, but especially now. Jerry Hughes is 35 years old, so like I think Jerry Hughes is hopefully going to be on a better defense this year and actually get some recognition for the type of play that he had last year. I think Jerry Hughes, like, genuinely likes being in Houston and wants to play in Houston. So maybe this is his last year and maybe the defense is respectable. But the biggest issue I have right now with a lot of the defensive end prospects is that I'm not super excited about that them at number 12, unless it were Tyree Wilson. Like, if Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson fell that far, I would be most excited about Tyree Wilson because he's just a butt kicker. He's a big bully of a dude. And I think DeMeco wants bullies right now. I think that's what he's talked about, is being physically imposing, punishing people. If you think about the San Francisco 49ers last year, both on offense and defense, when you watch them play, they just bullied people. And I know they ended up having issues with injuries themselves, but there was that absurd statistic where nobody won a game after playing the 49ers last year. Like the week after they played the 49ers, teams were 0-16 in the regular season, however it works out. Somebody had a bye week the one week. I think it was 0-15, and then the playoffs, obviously, Even the Eagles lost their next game after playing the 49ers. So they physically beat people up. But yeah, that would be, I think it's the biggest need, except that I'm not going to be super desirous of a defensive end at number 12 because I think a lot of the guys are going to be mocked there, like Brissy or Miles, what's his name? Like they're solid enough prospects, but I'm not blown away by them. They could end up being good and everything. I don't think like, oh yeah, that guy's a top 15 pick no matter what. I saw something about Davis Mills and Hendon Hooker. I like Hooker. He has so much more experience than all the others. He is 25 years old, which I don't think should be as big a deal as it is. I mean, guys play until they're 35 pretty regularly right now. I like if what your fear is that he's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback and you'll only get 15 years out of him instead of 20, then so be it. I'll swallow that poison pill if that's what I have to do. I think it's weird that the biggest knock against Hendon Hooker is that he plays on an awesome offense, but it's an air raid offense where just a lot of it doesn't translate to the NFL, and that he's 25 years old coming off of an ACL. Like ACLs with quarterbacks don't bother me that much because they tend to be one-off occurrences. Think about in general, not just with quarterbacks. Like Tom Brady was healthy as hell his entire career. He had 1 year where he tore his ACL. Frank Gore as a running back was one of the most durable running backs in the history of football, and he had 2 ACLs when he was a younger player. So Hendon Hooker's ACL doesn't bother me as long as the rest of his injury history hasn't been speckled. I worry more about a speckled quarterback injury history. Like I don't like the fact that Will Levis is having his injuries last year being used as an excuse because you can't throw the ball all that well. And if you can't run when you're injured, then what good are you to me? Because you're going to be injured in the NFL. Like missing time with little rinky-dink injuries, that's something that really good quarterbacks don't do. They play through that stuff. There is no playing when you're healthy as an NFL quarterback. You either need surgery or you're playing. Like that's it in my mind. Like other than, here and there, the odd ankle sprain or something. But for the most part, most years, I want to see you playing unless you've got broken bones or a surgery or maybe, your insides hanging out. Like from a motorcycle accident, like Ben Roethlisberger. I can't remember, was Roethlisberger's motorcycle accident during the season or in the off season? Just remember he was riding a motorcycle without a helmet in Pittsburgh, which is one of the scariest places. Rick Hagwood says later rounds are good for developmental players, but they must be able to play special teams. Yeah. Look, I don't think you're going to have to worry about special teams with the Texans. I think that's something that Caserio has done very well, actually. I mean, he's not going to get a lot of credit for it these days or like over these last couple of years. But that aspect ends up being one of those things that tips the scales a lot of times in close games, and people just don't really enjoy talking about it. But Caserio's done a really good job with that part of it. Let's see. The Will Levis talk is funny. Preach. Okay. Oh, I'll do this tomorrow. I went out and I was watching Will Levis, and I was like, honestly, kind of looking around trying to figure out what am I missing here? Like, I don't see why he's even polarizing because I don't see why he should be a first round pick. And so I'm like, all right, well, I got to double check this. I try to, especially when I'm doing quarterbacks or receivers, try to go out and find a lot of different opinions to see if what I'm seeing is backed up. So I went out and I found 7 different quarterbacks, ex-NFL quarterbacks, and one Steve Smith, and found their opinions on Will Levis. And I don't think Will Levis is polarizing at all. Almost all of them are not impressed with Will Levis. So, and I know James Palmer said that a lot of teams have a second round grade on Will Levis. I like the upside of his big arm, but I don't think he's Josh Allen. I just don't think he is. I don't think he's that level of athlete. I don't think his upside, his arm talent is as good. But I think that Josh Allen might get Will Levis drafted a lot higher. But it's not the accuracy issues that perhaps could be fixed with better footwork for me. It's that all these different quarterbacks kept saying And it was like, a lot of it, like the guys in the media, a lot of them are backups, which I love the backup quarterbacks because those guys have had to learn multiple systems and they have to really develop their brain as much as they can. But also Kurt Warner. It was like Chris Sims, Kurt Warner, even Dan Orlovsky, as he was trying to voice support for Will Levis, still acknowledged this. And then honestly, even Jordan Palmer himself, who is the quarterback's coach for Will Levis, like all these guys were talking about his need to make better decisions. And with the guys that were really critical, and it's hard for Kurt Warner to be critical. He's like trying like hell to be polite about it. But they're watching the film of Will Levis, and they just kept saying, these different guys kept saying, like, well, I don't know what he's looking at here. Like, I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't throw it. I don't know why he had two open receivers to the left and then he turned to the right of the field. I don't know why he's worried about this safety up top. Like all of these guys, they kept saying it. So that's the part that comes through when you watch them play. You're like, there's a certain indecisiveness here that I always try to, like when I'm watching quarterbacks, I always really try to, approach it knowing that there's a lot of stuff that I don't even know. I don't know at times there's reads that they're making that based on game plan, might not be immediately transparent, but all these guys like Kurt Warner that aren't typically very critical just kept saying the same thing. So that makes me nervous. I think the AR, Anthony Richardson, if the biggest thing he has going for him, obviously, is that he's freakishly athletic, but that also, and this is something James Palmer from NFL Network also said, his inexperience is really working in his favor right now because with Will Levis, he's got a lot more starting experience, which makes you look at him and say, well, how come you haven't fixed this stuff by now? Where with Anthony Richardson, they can look at him and say, well, let's see, he was injured in high school and then hasn't started that much. So, hey, this stuff's all upside. And all the quarterback coaches think they're going to be the guys that fix everybody. So, please subscribe, everybody. Really enjoyed you. I try to keep this to an hour every time we do it, so it doesn't get too long. And really appreciate everybody. Looking forward to the draft. Subscribe, like, tell a friend, all that good stuff. Thanks, guys. And then my wife's